I don't understand how people say that Biden and Harris have not accomplished anything within the past 4 years. Yes, they have. They've allowed 15 million illegals into this country. Like, that's a lot of work, guys. There's been a historic inflation crisis. Record high gas prices in all 50 states. Like, that's huge. Record consumer debt. They've released terrorists into this country. There's been the Ukraine-Russian war and Israel-Hamas war. And violent crime skyrocketing. Like, they've accomplished a lot. I literally don't understand.
Y'all recognize that more than 25% of our federal deficit every year is spent taking care of illegal immigrants? Like, take a look at 2023, for example. Total outlays, $6.1 trillion. Total revenue, $4.4 trillion. For a federal deficit of $1.7 trillion. Also in 2023, we spent $451 billion taking care of illegal immigrants. So you have a $1.7 trillion deficit, and then we do some simple math, and we see that $451 billion is 26.5% of $1.7 trillion, meaning that more than a quarter of all of our federal deficit each year is from illegals, is from paying to feed, house, and take care of illegal immigrants, to take care of people that are here illegally, to take care of people that aren't supposed to be here. I mean, just wrap your heads around that for a second. If we actually had a secure border, if we actually had some control over who the fuck came into our country, we could cut 26.5% off our deficit, which is an even bigger deal considering it's deficit spending, which means we're borrowing that money, which means we're going to pay interest on that money. And in 2023, we literally borrowed $451 billion. We're going to pay interest on it just to support illegals. Thanks, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris.
Can you imagine being told to vote for a candidate for president that's already in office and is guaranteeing to fix all of the problems that they told you didn't exist for the last 3.5 years? Kamala Harris says she's the one to fix the border, not Donald Trump, even though the numbers were lower under Donald Trump. But fix what problem? You told us for 3.5 years the border was closed and secured and safe. Now we're finding out that's not true.
Our freedoms are being stolen, guys. Credit card companies are out to get us. And if you don't understand the game, well, you end up getting played by the game. Now, if you're anything like me, guys, you know, you were probably out of shape, maybe in debt, living paycheck to paycheck, and just feeling like the system is just completely taking advantage of you. I remember for a long time, I could rarely ever get any time to spend with my wife. And it's kind of funny because where I used to work with a lot of married men. And a lot of those married men would always complain about their spouses as if they really just didn't even like their spouses, which is sounding like a pretty horrible situation. But that was the case for many of them. They didn't like who they were married to. But I was different. Anyway, through trial and error and through a lot of pain, I figured out how to gain freedom and also lose a lot of weight and actually get in shape. And guys, I'm gonna be honest with you, that was a game changer. To no longer be living paycheck to paycheck, figuring out how to get the credit cards to pay me, the power of a strong credit score. I pay thousands of dollars less per year for the same house as my neighbor just because my credit is better than his is. And this is not to brag. I mean, but this is the truth. The banks are literally taking advantage of the poor. It's like the people who can least afford it, they're charging the poor what is like unofficially called a poor tax or a tax on the poor. I mean, I'm now at a point where, you know, like, number one, I don't pay for credit cards. In fact, credit card companies pay me to use their cards. And I figured out how to build a lifestyle that is just ultimately very, very healthy. I lost a tremendous amount of weight and I put on a lot of muscle. But when I was struggling, I wish I knew people who knew these things. So anyway, I decided to create a community of like-minded people who are also interested, just like me, in living better. So if you guys want to join my community, it's called the Liberty Pursuit Network. It is brand new. Come on over. I'd love to have you guys and join like-minded people. Be positively motivated by others who are also on the same pursuit. So I'm going to leave a link for you guys so you can join me over on the Life Pursuit Network in the description down below this video. So check it out, guys, and let's not be a victim of this great wealth transfer that is taking place right now. We're now entering the twilight zone, folks. The truth is so glaring that voters are now realizing that this entire facade that Harris's campaign is trying to build up is nothing but a house of cards. What's surprising is that the storm and wind is being brought by CNN of all networks. They're now addressing how Harris has changed her position on different policies from the past. I can't believe CNN's actually admitting this. And if she's lost support of CNN, then she's most probably already lost the 2024 presidential election. And guys, before we get started, thanks so much for hanging out. Thank you for hitting the like button and subscribing to the channel. Let's get started. Now, we saw a very similar pattern with President Biden just before he was ultimately ousted out of the 2024 presidential election. Because I'm warning you guys, they go hard after her previous posts regarding border security.
Tonight, K-File investigates. In a new report you'll see first out front, the K-File team scoured Kamala Harris's tweets and statements going all the way back to 2017. And what they found was more than 50 instances of Harris slamming Trump's border wall. But now, new Harris campaign ads actually showcase that very wall.
As a border state prosecutor, she took on drug cartels and jailed gang members for smuggling weapons and drugs across the border.
And on top of critical tweets, Harris also wrote in her 2019 book, quote, "There was a bigger reason to oppose the border wall. A useless wall on the southern border would be nothing more than a symbol, a monument standing in opposition to not just everything I value, but to the fundamental values upon which this country was built. How could I vote to build what would be little more than a monument designed to send the cold, hard message, keep out?" Well, K-File's Andrew Kaczynski joins me now. So, Andrew, I mean, you all have gone through, scoured an incredible amount of material. Tell me more about what you found.
Yeah, that's right. We found more than 50 of those tweets criticizing the border wall before she used that in her ad. And I want people to take a look at just a few of what she said here. She called it wasteful, useless, a waste of taxpayer money, a vanity wall project, a wasteful border wall, a stupid wall, a medieval vanity project, and an unnecessary wall. And those are really just, there were more, there's just like 10 or like 50. But there was really a lot of this was the common refrain during the campaign. You read that quote where she said it was against everything that not only she stood for, everything America stood for, but she brought this up a lot. Take a listen to just one instance of that in 2019.
It's the president's vanity project.
His multi-billion-dollar vanity project called a wall is nothing more than a distraction from the fact that he actually hasn't focused on working people in America. He contrived a national crisis around his big distraction.
All right, so you go through all of that, you've got all the tweets, and yet all of a sudden in the ads, there's pictures of the wall, and then you went through to look at that wall. Yeah. Like, what is that specific wall that's in her campaign ads now? And you found something very interesting about this specific portion of the wall.
And what's also really remarkable about this is you heard her talking about it there, Trump's wall in his campaign during his presidency. There was really no greater symbol of Trump's presidency than the wall in the way that Democrats were attacking him over the wall and his restrictive immigration policies. So we looked in that ad, and if you look at it, that exact area of wall is in Sasabe, Arizona, and that is a portion of wall that was actually built by Donald Trump. It was built in an area where there was not previous wall. It was actually pretty controversial when they were building it at the time. So just to see that, and then there are other.
She's using his wall that he built to say, "Look at what I did." Basically,
and the other images of the wall, we weren't able to pinpoint, but there's telltale signs that was a Trump wall because there's an anti-climbing plate on top that became popularized during the Trump years.
I'm not sure many of you guys realize how big this is. CNN is actually doing some investigative reporting. I swear this has got to be a first. And they're calling Harris out for her lies. They're showing the public that she's using Trump's own policies and his wall to her advantage. Her campaign is trying to make it seem as if she thought of doing this entire time. Now, I know that Kamala Harris loves to pander to her crowd. She's done it even with her ever-changing accents. But this is on a whole nother level. She's outright stealing Donald Trump's wall and making it seem as if she's the one who basically came up with this idea and who's tough on the borders. But this is so far from the truth. She's not tough on the borders. She has time and time again said that she wants to decriminalize illegal immigration. She also pushed for health care to be provided to these same people. Like, what more do you have to hear? There are multiple top Democrats calling for these undocumented individuals to be made American citizens. This is absolutely asinine. Now, at the same time, we have folks on Social Security, we have veterans that are struggling to make ends meet. And this is why this report from CNN is just so shocking, because it's a direct call out of the vice president and how she wants to change her image when it comes to border security. But I need to ask you guys, do you believe this more moderate approach from Kamala, or is she just copying Donald Trump and pandering to her audience again? Now, guys, this topic alone is for sure to get some serious heat on Kamala Harris when it ultimately gets discussed in this upcoming debate. That is, if this upcoming debate on ABC with Donald Trump and Kamala Harris even happens. Word is now coming out that Kamala Harris and her team are doing their best to pull out of this ABC debate as gracefully as they can.
And I just wanted to come by and say hello. You guys are the reason I do what I do. And I just love your competitive spirit. I love how you guys are just working at it. You are ready to be a team and you're ready to compete. And I just got
Is she drunk?
so proud. How you guys doing?
Watch her arm.
What did Kamala Harris do, you guys? Seriously, did she just show up to her rally drunk?
Our extraordinary President Joe Biden. And he's going to speak in a minute, but there's a lot of love in this room for our president.
And that's not the only one, guys. Check out this other one.
Because when we think about the strength of our democracy, you know, I think that there's a duality to the nature of democracy. When it's intact, oh, it's so strong in terms of what it does to uphold and protect individual rights and freedoms. So strong in its nature. And it's very fragile. It will only be as strong as our willingness to fight.
So what do you guys think? Me, I'm just honestly surprised that people are still actually going to vote for this woman. Seriously. I mean, honestly, I heard people call her the word salad queen, and she's just been hanging out with Nancy. I mean, did you guys see those hand gestures? She could have been taking those lessons from Nancy Pelosi.
Sean, what do you make of that?
So first, he admitted to being drunk in the plea hearing with the court. We have court reporters that record everything that's being said in court. So we go back to the record, and he admitted that he was drunk driving. By the way, so the legal limit back then was 0.1, and he was 0.128. But today, in most states, I think in all states, the legal limit is 0.08. So he was over 50% above the legal limit for driving. So again, I think it goes back to just Tim Walz is a liar. Whether it was a stolen valor for his military service or here what happened with the drunk driving, be honest with people. Go, you know what, I made a mistake. But here's the problem. Democrats are now saying, listen, this was so long ago, this is irrelevant. But they're going back into J.D. Vance's history, pulling up old pictures of J.D. when he was in high school. With Kavanaugh, they went back to high school and college. It's relevant, your history, when you were a young man or a young woman, when you're a Republican. But if it's Tim Walz and you're a Democrat, let's disregard it because it was, 25 years ago.
It just doesn't make much sense. Washington Post doesn't think so either. Here's what they said. They said, whether the Harris proposal wins over voters remains to be seen, but if sound economic analysis still matters, it won't. Jason Furman worked for Obama. This is not sensible policy. I think the biggest hope is that it ends up being a lot of rhetoric and no reality. There's no upside here, and there is some downside. The Washington Post concluded that speech on Friday ranks as a disappointment. Was that her first bad day in 28 days as the media saw it?
Look, as the media saw it, maybe I'll say that. Look, I'm not on the sugar high that everybody else has been on. I'm excited. You see new energy out there when, I've been doing these kickoffs on weekends with volunteers, and there's 2 to 3 times the number of people that have been out there. But I know it's going to be a tough election between now and November. This is Michigan, and I am out there talking to all kinds of people.
Now, of course, the Democratic National Convention, the DNC, is happening right now as I'm making this video. But while Kamala Harris is making all sorts of questionable promises, I just kind of want to focus on former President Donald Trump's counter-programming and how Senators Ron Johnson and Rick Scott basically hammered Vice President Kamala Harris on inflation and the economy. Senator Johnson from Wisconsin definitely did not mince his words when he criticized Kamala Harris's limited policy proposals, saying, you can tell right now by what very few proposals that Kamala Harris has put on the table, she doesn't have a clue. He and Senator Rick Scott from Florida stood in front of several charts at the Trump International Hotel and Tower in Chicago and used their own personal business backgrounds to talk about the rising prices on food and necessities under the current administration. They both praised Donald Trump's understanding of business, not to mention our former president's success with businesses too. Now, according to Senator Scott, Donald Trump is a business guy who understands how businesses work. That is leaps and bounds ahead of Harris, who Scott said has no earthly idea how businesses businesses even work. Also, her vice presidential pick has no idea how businesses work either. I think that pretty much sums it up, guys. In a highly capitalistic country, this is the United States. Harris and her vice presidential picks seem to be so out of touch with the way that the business world works, not to mention basic economics. In fact, the senators were quite vocal in criticizing the Biden administration for policies that they believe are facilitating inflation increases. Just last week, Harris introduced a crackdown on corporate price gouging in the food industry with a proposed federal ban, the first of its kind. Not to mention, she's also aiming to drastically expand the child tax credit, allowing up to $6,000 during a child's first year, and wants to extend prescription drug price caps to everyone rather than just the seniors. Plus, she plans to set up a $40 billion fund to assist local governments to build more housing as well as taking on landlords. Now, the question is, with the country already trillions of dollars in debt, who's going to pay for all this? As Senator Scott rebutted, her idea of having basically price controls, it's never worked anywhere. This is pure socialism. Scott says he wants a free market. He wants a bottom-up economy. He wants capitalism. And that's what Donald Trump stands for. Johnson also took a swing at Harris and her running mate, Governor Tim Walz of Minnesota, for their lack of business savviness. His exact words: "It's very hard to run a successful business, and government leaders should really understand and emphasize with American entrepreneurs." Johnson compared Trump's vision of America with what Harris and Walz offer. According to under Harris, here's what's going to happen. We're going to see more inflation with her price control idea. We're going to see a lot of shortages. And take note, guys, these heavy punches were all while the Democratic National Convention was happening. So really, it's a media blitz during the DNC and a counter push happening from the Trump campaign in return for the Democrats trying to steal the show with the whole Harris switcheroo that they pulled. Trump campaign senior communication advisor Brian Hughes said that while they're at the DNC, former President Donald Trump and Senator J.D. Vance, they're doing battleground states. Now, guys, I covered that in detail in another video that you guys have to check out. Just click on my channel, click on videos, and check out where Kamala Harris is trying to back out of the debate against former President Donald Trump on ABC. Now, as always, guys, appreciate you guys being here. Thank you for hitting the like button. Thank you for subscribing to the channel and sharing this video. I'll see you on the next one.